Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome back. This week's parsha is Parshas Noach, certainly a favorite of many, where Noach and his family are saved in the confines of the teva of the ark, while the world around them is flooding. The world around them is experiencing the Mabul, the great flood. And in fact, we often think of this as like a punishment. God's punishing the world, but it's not so, say most of the commentators. It's not really a punishment, because if it were a punishment, we'd expect that some who were more wicked would be punished greater than those who were less wicked, as we see by the Egyptians when they sank in the sea. Some sank like lead, some suffered more and sank like straw, the verse says. Not so with the Mabul. The Mabul wasn't a punishment, it was a reset. It was a reset of the entire world. What was the immediate cause of this reset? Says the pussock at the beginning of this week's parsha, Vayomer Elokim LaNoach, God said to Noach, Kates kol basar balafanai. The end of all flesh has come before me. Meaning it's doing it to itself. The world is destroying itself. How so? Ki maloha aretz chamas. For the earth is filled with Hamas. What is Hamas? Not the terrorist organization, they didn't exist yet. The world is filled with Hamas, says Targum Onkelos, Chatofen. Chatofen means to grab. The world became takers. And because the world became takers, it was literally destroying itself. So what's the antidote? So says Hashem in the very next verse, I'm going to tell you the antidote, Noach. The antidote to the world becoming takers is to embark on the most ambitious project of Nesina, the most ambitious project of giving. I want you to build a teva. I want you literally to save the world. And not just to save the world, I want you to take care of the world. You and your family are going to spend the next year after that teva is built and the waters start falling. You and your family are going to spend an entire year feeding those animals, building the teva for 120 years, gathering together all the food necessary, gathering together the animals, and then over that year in the teva, taking care of those animals. It was the greatest project of giving ever. That, says Rav Dessler, was going to be the antidote, was going to be what would counteract that chatufin, that grabbing that literally destroyed the world. The pasuk says, Tzohar ta'asa la teva. You shall make a tzohar, a light for the teva. What's this light? So our sages say it's an even tova, it's a special stone. Says Rav Dessler, you know what that special stone was? That special stone that illuminated the teva was the chesed, was the kindness of Noach and his family. That's what kept that boat afloat. In the raging rivers, in the raging oceans, in the tempest that surrounded them, it wasn't the planks of wood that held it together. It was a year full of absolute, overflowing, loving giving. Loving nesina, chesed. It's interesting, it's very interesting that the Or Gedaliahu explains that if you look at the dimensions of the teva, if you look at the dimensions of the teva we know was 30 amos high. It was 30 amos high. And the pasuk makes a point of saying that the roof was slanted. V'al ama tichalena milamala, and it should come to an amma, one cubit at the roof. There was some sort of ledge at the roof that was 1 cubit wide. Says the Or Gedaliahu, that 30 amos tall actually represents the name of God that relates to chesed. The name of God that relates to chesed, God, as we know, has many names, but the name of God that relates to chesed, or one of his names that very much signifies chesed, is the name Kel, Aleph Lamed. As the pasuk says in Tehillim, Chesed Kel Kol Hayom. God, Kel, does chesed, kindness, all day long. The height of the teva was the Lamed. Lamed equals 30. And Ve'al Ama Tichalena Milamala, there's one more on top, that's the Aleph. Aleph, Lamed, Kel, the chesed represented by that teva, both in its dimension and in terms of what was actually happening inside of it, that's what saved the world. That's what counteracted the chatufin, the Hamas, the destruction that the world wrought upon itself. This Shabbos Parshas Noach, is special in yet another way. It's not just the parsha that we read this week, but it is special here at the Meyerland Minyan Synagogue because 20 years ago on Parshas Noach was the very first Shabbos that we started way back in the JCC. You know, when I talk to people, visitors and locals alike, about the Meyerland Minyan Synagogue, the word that comes up, the word that people use to describe our shul is chesed. It's a shul of chesed. It's a shul of warmth. It's a shul of giving. It's a shul where people are concerned for one another, there for one another. Their Shabbos tables are open. Their Yom Tov tables are open when it's not COVID. And it is really something that's at the core of our shul here. Our shul, the Meir Lemon Synagogue, is a teva. It's a teva in a world that is filled with a tempest, often of the opposite midah, of the opposite trait. May we continue to grow and preserve that chesed that is at the core of who we are as a Jewish people and who we are as a community. Shabbat Shalom and happy anniversary to the Maryland Minyan Synagogue.